10 insane 90s extreme superhero costumes and stories behind them. Explained. The 90s were pretty exciting times for comic book lovers. The decade started off with the biggest ever boom in the comic book industry, and sales were at an all-time high.
Well, these days, the cheapest comic book costs at least $1, and even big corporations collect them as one of the best investments around.
However, amidst this craze, it cannot be overlooked that the love for something extreme was pretty consistent in this era, and it reflected in the comics created. From extreme raw violence to objectification of women, nothing was spared. In this feeding frenzy, too many characters were introduced, and some bizarre costume designs of super popular characters scarred the fans. Even extremely famous characters like Wonder Woman and Captain America couldn't escape the disastrous manipulations to their outfits, and in some cases even their personalities were altered to be more extreme. In this video, we will take you for a traumatic ride through these extreme superhero costumes and the remarkable stories behind them.
Subscribing to our channel. This is a small click from you, but it means a lot to us. Thank you. Let's begin.
Diana's biker costume. They were habituated to seeing Princess Diana of the Amazons as the only Wonder Woman. However, the 90s had some other ideas when we saw a story crop up where Diana was replaced by Artemis as the coveted superhero. Before this storyline was introduced, the Amazon Queen saw a vision from the future where Wonder Woman is killed. Hence, she arranged for a new contest to pick a fitting Wonder Woman, deeming Diana inadequate for the task. A fierce warrior named Artemis emerged as the victor through some manipulations by Hippolyta, and Diana was stripped of her title. Artemis was also provided with the weapons and tools like the Lasso of Truth and the Sandals of Hermes that took her at par with the powerful Diana. Her character, however, lacked the compassionate touch of Diana. She acted with ruthless violence, and the likes of Batman never acknowledged her as Wonder Woman. In fact, Diana herself was not too happy about the developments and continued serving as an active superhero around Boston. Her costumes were a far cry from the simplistic red and blue attire. For some strange reason, DC provided the fans with a Wonder Woman who was clad in a pair of skin-tight biker shorts and a leather jacket. Together with the strange abs belt and her leather bra, she looked more like a groupie for a rock band than a superhero. To cut a long story short, Artemis eventually succumbs during a battle with the White Magician, and Diana gets her title back after decimating the White Magician into a pile of ash. Lesson learned. When something is working perfectly, do not worry about changing it. Invisible Woman's insane Boob-Window costume. Invisible Woman, aka Sue Storm Richards, was the first female superhero from Marvel Comics and was a much-loved character in Fantastic Four. She was exposed to cosmic storms during a research mission in outer space and got her powers of invisibility and control of force fields. Ever since its conception, the character was quite an attractive lady, but never before was she treated as a sex symbol. But the crazy 90s had arrived, and it brought with it one of the most horrifying attempts at changing her image completely. Invisible Woman was now given a costume that was barely a bathing suit and left her legs and midriff bare. The bizarre boob window in the costume had literally no explanation whatsoever, and it came as a shock since this character was previously a respected superhero in the comic universe. She was known to be someone with incredible powers and intelligence, but suddenly, there she was in a skimpy outfit with a 4 cutout around her bosom. It was undoubtedly alluring and tantalizing, but at the same time there was no question about it being a sexist move. And Marvel irked the fans who protested against this lewd change. Soon after, Marvel returned to the classic look that we associate with Susan, and our Invisible Woman was restored to her dignified self. Daredevil armored suit. For many, the Daredevil comic series was an intriguing read, as they loved the idea of a blind superhero with incredible powers fighting crime. Around 1993, this series took a dramatic turn when we saw a new armored suit for Matt Murdock, or Daredevil. A storyline titled Fall from Grace was devised keeping in mind the upcoming 30th anniversary in 1994 for this legendary character. We see the evil general in pursuit of a telepathic secret agent who knows about a secret chemical hidden in the subways of New York City. This chemical can mutate people, and Silver Sable's Wild Pack is hired to track down the agent. Daredevil comes to the rescue and fights Sable's mercenaries in a brutal battle. His costume is ripped apart during combat, and he gets an armored suit to handle the powerful blows better and defend the agent. The storyline has several guest stars, but the real issue has to be the rather awkward costume. The looks of it with plated armor jutting out randomly from every body part isn't particularly eye-catching. The worst part was the chest design that had arrows pointing to his crotch for no apparent reason. Pardon our mean words here, but even a blind superhero deserves to dress up better than this hideous armored suit. Feral Wolverine. Remember the time when Wolverine went feral? Well, it certainly is one of those mishaps that Marvel wants you to forget. A major X-Men crossover was written, titled Fatal Attractions, and the plot moved to a point where Magneto strips Wolverine's skeleton of its adamantium. It nearly meant death for Wolverine, as he was dealing with this trauma and his healing powers were working overtime. He did manage to recover, and we were provided with more insights about Wolverine's system. It turns out that the adamantium was actually poisoning him slowly, and his healing factor was fighting the metal constantly. This meant that in the absence of the metal, Wolverine could go through with his natural mutation. The new Wolverine was far more animalistic in nature and was easily enraged. He would yell instead of talking, and most of his mannerisms were taking wild forms. He even left Xavier's mansion after succumbing to his wild side, and went to live in the wild. If you thought Wolverine was already a pretty extreme character, think again, because Marvel had other ideas. Wolverine even lost his nose for some reason, and the weird half mask that he wore made his legendary mane resemble mutton chops. The appearance certainly did not go well with the fans, and soon the idea was dropped. Logan was back in the mansion, and things were just as before with Wolverine for no logical explanation whatsoever. Let's just pretend that it was a depressing nightmare that didn't really happen. Punisher 2099. The 2099 line of superheroes were pretty exciting, and Marvel's plan was successful as the fans were interested in discovering the futuristic look of their favorite superheroes. Spider-Man 2099, Doom 2099, and a few others had already been out, and the expectations from Punisher 2099 were sky high. It tells the story of a world in the future where corporations have taken over the administration of the cities, and everything has been privatized. A man is seen trying to get away, but eventually some crooks slaughter him to get his heart. This is when Punisher of 2099 comes to the stage and kills the thugs. He has his own identity protection system where his face is covered digitally and makes identification by surveillance systems and cameras impossible. The Punisher works for the Office of Public Eye, which is somewhat like a police force, and goes about delivering his brand of vigilante justice. The storyline was fun, but the origin or backstory of the Punisher lacks in content. The creators tried something new with the dreaded villain in Kron Stone, who later became Venom 2099. While we can accept everything else about this series, the costume is beyond our tolerance limits. The simplistic yet perfectly suited design is gone, and this look is in line with the 90s trend of more the merrier. The giant red shoulder pads looked oddly out of place, and the ridiculously huge collars made no sense whatsoever. It's no surprise that not many fans back in the day appreciated this change in costumes.
I trust you have not forgotten me, Batman.
Azrael.
Azrael Batman. Even those who were not too familiar with the comics have loved Christopher Nolan's Batman trilogy. There is an unforgettable sequence in The Dark Knight Rises where Bane defeats Batman in a fight and beats him to a pulp. This humiliating defeat was inspired from a storyline in the 90s when Bane breaks Batman's back and paralyzes him. Bruce Wayne is well aware of the desperate need of a protector in Gotham City and picks Jean-Paul Valley to be his substitute. This convoluted assassin fought as Azrael, named after the Angel of Death. Batman trained Azrael himself, and he turned out to be a meaner and angrier version of Bruce Wayne. He wasn't nearly as compassionate as Bruce and often let the criminals die along with the victims. Azrael was technologically superior and was initially loved by the fans till they grew tired of his ruthless ways. Batman healed from his injuries and had to finally face against Azrael to get back his identity. The costume chosen by Azrael was as repulsive as his career, and his futuristic mentality didn't necessarily translate into some super cool attire. There were random medals and pouches as a part of the costume, and the collar looked more like a neck brace. The wings looked weirdly placed, and the knives that were jutting out of his calves were no more meaningful. In short, it was a package of everything that doesn't go together. We just shudder at the rumors that suggest that DC had thoughts of going deeper into the character and making him a more permanent replacement. Long live Bruce Wayne! Dr. Fate. Dr. Fate had one of the most gorgeous costumes in comic book history. His blue and gold outfit combined with the glamorous golden helmet made him a stylish superhero. But sadly, the simplicity wasn't good enough for the 90s. To add some extreme elements to this costume, DC actually introduced a new Dr. Fate in Jared Stevens. The story of Jared Stevens is rather intriguing, as he comes as a reluctant emissary to serve as Dr. Fate. The astounding powers of the Amulet of Anubis and the weapons made from the Helmet of Nabu powered him, and he was initially hired to retrieve the cloak, helmet, and amulet of Dr. Fate from Egypt. The agents of Kingdom, a demon, wanted to keep the artifacts for himself, and while trying to defend himself, Jared injured his right arm. Jared initially refused the offer to become the new Dr. Fate, but slowly he was drawn into the role of a responsible defender for the Earth. The most disturbing thing about this character would have to be the appearance. Everything from his single strip of dyed hair to his face tattoo screamed inappropriate, and the numerous pouches and arm wraps did his costume no good. His love for knives didn't really make the character a badass as the creators intended, and for a major part, this was a disappointing Dr. Fate. The storyline lasted 23 issues, and he was killed off by a wizard named Mordru. Never before did we feel relieved at the death of a superhero. Superman, Red and Blue. It has been 80 years since the stories of Superman made for a crazy fan following all over the world. During this time, there have been many strange storylines that will leave you bewildered. The best thing about Superman, and also probably the worst thing about him, is that there is no definite continuity or rules as to what he is capable of. This allows the writers a lot of scopes to explore the wild possibilities and put together some insane scenarios. Going down the memory lane for such strange stories, the first thing that comes to mind is the time when Superman cloned himself to bring about world peace. It was the early 1960s, but the bizarre narrative certainly gives us the crazy 90s vibe. The plot starts off with Clark Kent struggling to keep up with his multiple missions and uses his brain evolution machine to make himself 100 times faster. This causes him to split into two versions, the Red Superman and the Blue Superman. They work together to accomplish the tasks and eventually build an anti-evil ray that transforms people into a hypnotic state of being good. They retire after crime is extinct. Using this idea, DC created a Superman with new electric powers in 1997, and he was transformed into an electric blue Superman. Yet again, Superman was split into two versions, but unlike last time, they had conflicting personalities and both competed to become Lois Lane's love interest. Eventually, Superman lost his electric powers, and the story arc was put to a premature end because fans mostly despised the idea. All we can say is that this certainly ranks amongst the weirdest adventures of Superman, and was pretty entertaining while it lasted for about 13 issues. Thunderstrike. The fans of Thor can imagine nothing substituting the mighty god of thunder. However, Marvel did think of such a possibility and crafted the plot of Thunderstrike that involves Eric Masterson. Eric was a friend of Thor and fought alongside him while battling Mongoose. He was mortally wounded, and Thor requested Odin to merge their life forces, which ensured that there would be two men within one body. It soon became a struggle for power between the two as they fought for control, and when Odin thought Thor had slain Loki, he banished Thor and bestowed all his powers on Eric. Eventually, Thor was recalled back, and Odin made Eric his special weapon called Thunderstrike. He realized that the Thunderstrike had a different set of powers than Mjolnir, and used it to slay Seth, the Egyptian god of death. Eric had quite a heroic ending, and apart from his silly costume, everything was pretty neat about him. The biker vests and awkward ponytails didn't really suit the character, but we could tolerate the bizarre looks of it courtesy of the exciting storyline. We must also admit that we like how Thor is, and there is hardly a need to have a replica of our perfect superhero. Lady Octopus. Dr. Otto Octavius is the much-dreaded villain who troubles Spider-Man quite a lot. A new female character with similar powers was introduced in the comic strip Amazing Spider-Man, issue number 405, and this was a lady named Carolyn Trainer. She was a student of Octavius and got her hands on 4 sets of tentacles that were identical to the ones owned by Octavius. She also possessed the power of the personal force field that allowed her to stop anything from hitting her. Dr. Octopus was her beloved instructor, whom she admired a lot, and close proximity that was created between the Scarlet Spider and her father irked her. She helped in the resurrection of Dr. Octopus after his death and also restored his lost memory. Slowly, she slipped into the role of his assistant, and with time, this unique character took the backseat and faded out. Could the costume have been better? Well, why do you think she makes the list? With her green outfit and golden helmet, it was hard to accept her as a serious villain. However, keeping the extreme costume aside, this was an interesting introduction for sure.
Susan, let's not fight.
No, let's.